This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. I am not a doctor or registered nutritionist, and I do not provide medical advice. You are advised to do your own research and make decisions in partnership with your healthcare provider. If you're pregnant, nursing, have a medical condition, or are taking any medication, please consult your physician and do not go off any medication without consulting with your healthcare provider. Nothing in this podcast should be relied upon to determine dietary changes, a medical diagnosis, or course of treatment. Welcome to the Slightly Greener Life podcast. This is your host, Tanya Harris. I am an award-winning environmental toxin expert, best-selling author, and mother of three. I created this podcast as a place to help busy moms ditch the overwhelm and start living a low-toxin life. Now, let's get into this week's episode. Welcome back to another episode of the Slightly Greener Life. If you have followed me for a while, you've probably heard me talk about endocrine disruptors. You have probably also heard the term when it comes to household, personal care, and beauty products, or you might have heard them called by other names such as hormone disruptors. And I feel like these are such a big part of the chemicals that we should avoid. And a lot of the toxic chemicals that we'll be talking about will fall into this category of endocrine or hormone disrupting chemicals. We'll talk more about specific ones in future episodes, but today I thought I would give you a high-level overview of what these chemicals are and what they do, so that when I say endocrine disruptors in future episodes, you'll have an understanding of what I'm talking about. Now, there's quite a bit of info here today, so I just want to preface that right away. But don't worry, I have all of the info from today's episode on my website so that you can keep it handy for reference. And I also want to say real quick that some of this information can be pretty scary at first, and I totally get that. And it's so frustrating knowing that these chemicals are in and are allowed in many of our everyday products. But I just want you to take a deep breath and keep listening, because the good news is that you're already taking control of your health. Just by listening to this podcast and learning this information, you're empowering yourself to be an educated consumer. And I'm going to help you learn exactly what to be on the lookout for so you'll know if your favorite products contain any of these ingredients. And remember, you don't have to take notes here. You can find all of this info on my website at slightlygreener.com/episode 5. So with all that being said, let's start digging in. Before we get into what endocrine disruptors are, let's talk real quick about the endocrine system and what it does. The endocrine system is where our body's hormones are made, stored, and secreted. And hormones are our body's messengers. So an endocrine disruptor is a man-made chemical or substance that interferes with the function of the endocrine system. And it can do this in several different ways. It can imitate our hormones. It can block our hormones and prevent them from doing their job. It can produce or secrete hormones when they're not needed. And it can also cause an over or underproduction of hormones. So if you can imagine a synthetic man-made chemical imitating or getting in the way of a hormone trying to do its job, you can really see where these health issues can crop up. And this is so important too, because the endocrine system regulates every function of the body. Endocrine disruptors are linked to health effects such as weight gain, insulin resistance, diabetes, allergies, asthma, cardiovascular disease, fertility issues, thyroid problems, neurodevelopmental disorders, and things such as ADHD, learning disabilities and autism, and lower IQ, and even an increased cancer risk, and can also affect things such as hunger, mood, and even sleep. And endocrine disruptors affect all of us. But remember that children are especially vulnerable to the health effects of toxic chemicals, no matter what they are, because their skin is thinner, which can allow more penetration of chemicals through their skin. And pound for pound, they breathe more air and drink more fluids and eat more food than an adult. And they're more closely tied to their environment because smaller children crawl on the floor and they stick their fingers and just about anything else they can get their little hands on into their mouths. And not to mention, their detoxification pathways are not as developed or as efficient as an adult's is, meaning that they cannot detoxify and get rid of these chemicals as quickly, which leaves the chemicals in the body for a longer period of time. Plus, kids are young and they have more years of life ahead of them. We don't know what the long-term effects of many of these chemicals are. And not to mention, when we're talking about hormone disrupting chemicals, there are critical times during development where you definitely don't want a hormone disrupting chemical to interfere with hormones during a child's growth and development. So those were some pretty scary facts there. But remember, I'm telling you all of this because there are solutions. So let's talk about some of the places they're found and then go into solutions and how to avoid them. So unfortunately, they're found in just about everything. They can be lurking in everything from your food to your personal care and beauty products, and even in medicine. But the good news is that you can greatly reduce your exposure if you know what to be on the lookout for. So some of these common endocrine disrupting chemicals include phthalates, parabens, flame retardant chemicals, BPA, triclosan, which is an antibacterial, and Teflon, which is the coating of nonstick pans. So when you're talking about phthalates, those are things that are added to plastic to make plastic more soft and pliable. And they're found in things like vinyl shower curtains and flooring, sometimes some scented items like air fresheners, cleaning, cosmetics, and laundry detergents, shampoos and shaving creams. I mean, there's just so many that they can hide in these scented products. Plastic food storage containers, soft vinyl bath toys, and nail polish. And then there's other things like PFAs, which are used to make products stain resistant or waterproof or nonstick. So again, things like nonstick cookware, they're also found in pizza boxes, microwave popcorn bag linings, and cosmetics like eyeshadow. And then there's BPA, which can be found in everything from gas station, bank, and store receipts, water bottles, even those labeled as BPA free, and even in canned foods such as soups and canned tomatoes. Another endocrine disrupting chemical are parabens. And these are found in personal care products such as hair products, body wash, lotion, deodorant, shaving creams, moisturizers. There's just so many. Cosmetics that can be found in eyeshadow, lipstick, foundations, and chapstick. So what you'll see on the label is something that ends in paraben, like propylparaben, ethylparaben, butylparaben. These are the ones that are commonly used in cosmetics. And sometimes they're even found in snack foods, so be sure to check those labels too. Next up is flame retardants, and a lot of times these are found in furniture such as polyurethane foam products, in mattresses, upholstered furnitures, pillows, even in flame-resistant clothing such as infant and toddler pajamas, electronics, building foam insulation, and even in soda. So next up is triclosan. And these are used in antibacterial products such as hand sanitizer, but also in household products such as cutting boards and dishwashing liquids. They're also found in personal care products such as deodorant and toothpaste, and even in antibacterial clothing such as some sock brands especially. So the last place we're going to talk about that endocrine disrupting chemicals can be found is a little bit shocking, but it's in common household dust. Dust is actually the number one exposure in a home that's the source for flame retardant chemicals. And it also harbors things like phthalates and lead and other toxic chemicals. So one thing you can do here is to damp mop. Make sure it's damp. Don't dry mop because dry mopping can spread the dust around. And dust frequently and vacuum to keep the household dust at bay, especially in those areas where your children spend the most time, especially if they're on the floor or playing with toys in a certain area. You can vacuum carpets and floors with a HEPA filter, and this will also help reduce exposure. All right, so I flew through that really quickly, some of those endocrine disrupting chemicals. But remember, again, they're on my website. So here are some tips real quick to help you avoid these endocrine disrupting chemicals. One thing you can do is avoid products with the words fragrance or perfume, or sometimes you'll see that fancy word parfum. Look for products that say phthalate free and scented only with essential oils or no synthetic fragrance. Look for those on the labels. Buy organic produce, meat, and dairy as much as possible because some pesticides contain hormone disrupting chemicals. And avoid using scented candles or plug-in fresheners. Really almost anything that's scented, but these are a couple of big ones. You can diffuse essential oils instead if you like a nice scent, or you can use a safer brand of candle. And a couple that I like are Pure Plant Home and Fontana candles. Store food in glass storage containers rather than plastic. And again, including ones that say BPA free. I would go to glass or stainless steel options. And look for nail polish that says phthalate free. And I have some of these brands listed in the podcast notes on my website. And dust and vacuum the places where your family spends the most time, a few times a week, if not daily. So that was a lot of information for this episode. But again, I just wanted to give you kind of a high level view of what these hormone or endocrine disrupting chemicals can do, because so many of the chemicals that we come in contact with every day can affect our hormones. But now that you know what to be on the lookout for, it will be easier to avoid them and also reduce your exposure. And as you learn this information, it's really easy to freak out and think, oh no, I use that product on my kids and it's not safe, or I have plug-in air fresheners all over my house. But don't freak out, because we do the best with the information we have at the time. And you might not have had this information before, but now you have more control. You know how to start replacing toxic products with cleaner versions. Check out my website to see these tips and to find some safer product brands. Go to slightlygreener.com/episode 5 so that you can grab these tips and start avoiding endocrine disrupting chemicals today. Thank you so much for joining me in this episode, and I'll see you next week. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Slightly Greener Life podcast. Please take a moment to subscribe to the show, and then be sure to share it with a friend who you know wants simple steps to living in this complex world. I'll see you next time.